Guys, have you ever noticed this? One day Claude Code writes a beautiful code and the next day, same project, same prompt and everything, but all of a sudden it creates like five new files, maybe two helper functions and so on and so forth. And maybe some random, architecture that literally nobody asked for. First I genuinely thought Claude was the real problem. But later what I realized is Claude is not confused. My project is totally confused. After I started using the four files in my repo, whatever project repo you take, Claude became very more consistent. Let me tell you what is the real problem is. So just see, most of the people use Claude Code this way. You'll just open the terminal, asks for a feature, and Claude writes the code. And again tomorrow we'll open the new session and explain everything from scratch. Like for example, use Python only, don't use LangChain, keep it very simple. Put tools in the specific file again and again and again. It will keep on repeating. At some point, we actually become the real documentation for the Claude. And that is not the actual problem here. Every new cloud session starts like a new employee, like joining in the new company. No idea what is happening, no idea what rules to follow, and no idea like what exactly we are building. So it's like a brand new session for the cloud every time. Let me just prove you what exactly I mean. Okay, so this is my project. If you see under the source folder, like I have like four simple files here. Like it's a small Python agent, basic memory tools and agent loops. It's like a very simple project. No, there is no markdown files or nothing in my folder structure. It's just four simple files. And usually how people prompt, let me just write a single prompt here saying like, add a weather tool that fetches real data from the internet. Now I'll just hit enter and let's see what exactly the Claude does now. Okay guys, if you see Claude has completed the task, if you see it has updated the two files, tools.py and agent.py. So there are few things which we didn't ask for it and it does. Like, we have some own, requirements and it does its own job because we didn't give the proper instructions to the Claude. If you see it has created a new function called weather tool and it used like, URL label JSON and it didn't even use the API key here. And also it created its own dictionary, we didn't even ask for the dictionary. And same way if you go to the agents.py file, so it actually triggers on the keywords which are mentioned here, but we didn't ask for this. And also it has created two new functions which we didn't even ask for. So this is what the problem with the Claude. But if you see here, nothing is wrong technically, but nothing matches of our project also. So tomorrow again, we'll open the new session here and same prompt, we'll be having the different files. Different files might come, but this routine will be same. So then what I understood is Claude is exactly not the problem. The real problem is the context. So then I found this workflow. So nothing fancy, no frameworks, no plugins, nothing. Just four markdown files which I pasted here just now. So those are one is architecture.md, claude.md, PRD.md, tasks.md. People usually call it Claude folder. Honestly, most people only need first two. That is Claude.md and the PRD.md. These two are more than enough. But having these four are good. Let's start with the most important file called Claude.md. I'll just minimize it, and if you see, think of it, Claude.md as an instructions for the Claude. Okay, so just telling like a junior developer, like in this company we usually do things this way. So in my project, I wrote these things. Just go through one by one here. I was just mentioning, use the coding standards properly. No pip install, nothing, no langchain, nothing. Just use Python standards only. Already mentioned here. If you see, imports, how to import it properly, everything clear, and how the error handling needs to be done, and what's the testing mindset and everything. And also, I clearly mentioned here the documentation standards. How should be the file headers must be present, what doc strings format you need to follow, and what are the markdown docs which are present in our folder so that you can just go through them. And the important thing is architecture level guidelines. So here I detailedly mentioned about the architecture of our project. So the architecture, layering part, how the files and what are the files and etc. And design rules and everything. And whenever you are trying to add a rule, follow these kind of instructions. And I also mentioned all the rules for keeping the code very simple so that once the Claude is done its job, we should be able to easily understand this task. And if you see this line, I mentioned it clearly. So whenever you have in doubt, so just blindly don't implement it. Instead, create a to do comment and just an one line explanation rather than over engineering it. And I also mentioned the rules for the beginner friendly code and mainly rules for the comments in the doc strings, how exactly we need to write the comments in the doc strings, everything in detail here. So once you are done with all this, now every time Claude works on this project, it already knows the rules. I don't have to repeat the same thing in the chat. Once I asked the Claude Code, to add the reminder tool, having this Claude.md in our folder, I can see the clear difference, one function in the tools.py and, minor changes in the agent.py done without Claude.md file. Weather tool, you just saw how the response is. The same Claude Code, different instructions in the repo. So second markdown file is the PRD.md. It sounds like a fancy name, but it has a simple meaning. The meaning is like, what exactly we are building, says the PRD. So if you see here, this is my PRD file. So, in this project, I wrote, for this project, I wrote like build a beginner friendly AI agent demo. It has all the features. If you just scroll down, if you have all the features, which includes like memory, calculator tool, search tools, agent loops in, simple Python. And, I'll also mention the audience, who are the audience, maybe beginners, learning agents. And I also mentioned the goals here on the success criteria, everything, what exactly we are building, everything will be mentioning in this PRD.md. So once you add this file in your folder, then Claude understands the destination. Without destination, AI is just like making the random decisions. With the destination, every decision becomes an, intentional and, meaningful. If you just scroll down below, there is something called out of scope here. So here, if you see, we will literally mention which are all excluded, so that whenever Claude is trying to write something, it will keep these things in mind and it will never ever use these things in our project. So if you see, I have mentioned like no LangChain, no real LLM APIs, no SQLs, no Dockers, no WebUI, anything. So once we have written all these things clearly, there will be no confusion to the Claude and it exactly writes how exactly we need. Now let's come to the third markdown file called ARCHITECTURE.md. This is one of the most underrated file, I would say, because see, AI usually loves to create new files on new folders. You ask for one feature and it will obviously create, helpless.py and so on and so forth. But we didn't even ask for that. If you see, I'll just scroll it down the below in the ARCHITECTURE.md file. There is something called the ASCII agent state machine. So in my project, I kept it like very easy, simple. Okay. If you see, entry point runs the demo and the agent loops pick up the tools and it stores the conversation and the tools are, calculator, search and fallback. That's it. It's like very simple four files. Now architecture files tells the Claude memory goes into the memory.py, tools goes into the tools.py and, agent related logics and everything goes to the agent.py. And it also says that don't touch the any structure, keep it simple, no confusion, just follow this flow. You see, and coming back to this flow, once the user enters the message, it will select the tool. We need to select one of the tools and it just save it in the memory and they respond. This is a simple architecture of this project. Beyond that, don't get any new files, nothing. So also I have also created few other folder structures and how the memory flows and each and everything. If you see, I have also mentioned the data flow, how exactly the data flows so that you don't need to confuse and create a new files or anything. And this is my favorite MD file called task.md file. Let me show you why exactly I'm saying that my favorite. Task.md is like basically a to-do list for the project. I will mention all my completed tasks, pending task and future task here. Now, for example, the calculator part is done and memory part is done, agent is done. Now, what are the pending tasks? For example, let's take this T013. The task is, add help command to the agent fallback. Now, instead of writing a huge prompt, I can literally say, just implement the next pending task from the task.md file. That's it. You can it will just Claude what it does now. Just go through the task.md file and it already knows what exactly the next task is according to the priority wise, and it will just pick the task and it will just implement it. It didn't redirect my whole agent, it didn't even pick the random files or add the new random files. So all it did is it just picked pending thing in my to-do list and it just created that. So this is one of the best use case of this task.md files. We don't need to write a huge prompts every time for that list of tasks, all the pending tasks here. Now let us see some demo part here. Now I want Claude to complete this task. So instead of writing a huge prompt on this task, I'll just do something like this. I'll just give this simple task here. I'll just hit enter. Now let's see what exactly the Claude does. If you see, it has gone through the task.md file, prd.md file, and it has got up this T013 is the next pending task. So it understood what exactly is the next pending task, and it is about to start the task without even asking any questions. We didn't give the huge prompts, nothing. So it will just go through these tasks.md files and other md files, and it will by itself starts the implementation. This is the exact moment where I realized why people love Claude Code very much. Most of the people use the Claude Code in the wrong way, and thinking that Claude is not working as expected, but that's not the real case. Most of the people literally don't have idea how exactly to use Claude Code in the proper way. Keep one thing in mind, that you should give as much as context to the cloud, not in the way of prompt, but in the way of like markdown files or the folder structure. So when the repo has the context, Cloud Code actually feels more smarter. And honestly, don't literally overcomplicate it. Today itself, just create this Claude.md file in your project, and inside it write your coding rules, folder structures, folder rules, and what are the things to avoid, etc. That's more than enough, and you'll immediately notice the better outputs. Then slowly add the PRD.md file, what exactly are you building and what exactly you are not building, everything. And then go to the talks.md file. This will be very helpful when you are working with the multiple sessions. And the final part is the architecture.md file. When your repo gets bigger and bigger, Claude keeps putting new files in the wrong places, and this architecture.md file will help you in that very, very, very much. So next time when Claude Code gives you, weird outputs, don't immediately blame the model. Ask yourself, like, did I give the Claude Code enough context? Because bigger prompts may help obviously, but bigger project documentation even helps it more better.